Welcome to Roots and Resilience. I'm Dr. Sejal.
And I'm Dr. Nehal. We have had some incredible conversations with inspiring individuals that we feel compelled to share with you all.
Listen with an open mind and an open heart. You never know, you might just pick up a pearl that might spark something in you. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of Roots and Resilience. We are delighted today to be joined by Sejal Kargal, who is an Indian American artist, creative producer, fusion, singer-songwriter, DJ, founder of UNDEFINED and Rosewater. It's one of the first diaspora-led music festivals in the US. She creates spaces that feel like home for anyone who has left pieces of themselves behind to chase something new. This is going to be a really, really interesting conversation, guys. Welcome, Sejal, to the pod.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Amazing. I mean, you're joining us all the way, like we're defying 8-hour time zones to do this. And I'm super grateful for us to be together today. So before we get into anything, when no one's watching, if I asked you to introduce yourself without any of those titles, who is Sejal?
That is such a good question. I think at the end of the day, without any titles, it goes back to kind of what you already said in my bio. I feel like I can't be defined by any of these labels. And so I really live my life like as an undefined individual. It's literally so important to me. It's branded on me. This is the undefined symbol in Sanskrit. It's 1/0, which 1 divided by 0 is undefined and also infinity at the same time. So I think that's who I am. I'm someone that can't really be quantified by labels. And I feel like they've always like kind of limited my potential and who I am. And I like to see that there's home and new spaces for those who are like me that feel similarly and leave parts of themselves behind to chase something new. And I think that really is like an embodiment of the diaspora.
Wow. And where was this? I love the tattoo, by the way.
Thank
1/0,
you.
undefined. That is incredible. How did this come about? Was there like a turning point in your life where you thought, do you know, I'm done with labels. They don't define me. I'm more than these labels that are being put on me. Was there a specific episode that made you change the way you approach things and change your perspective and change your direction?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it comes from feeling like I would try really hard to fit into certain quote unquote diaspora spaces, and then I would always feel like I had a mask on. So I think just really as I grew up and came into terms with who I am and kind of did that self discovery, whether that was growing up like as a first generation in the US, in a place where there was no one else around me that came from a similar background, and also being the first American in my family and also the only educated woman and the only woman who has a career like in my bloodline, I feel like it's tough because there's no way to really quantify that when you are the first. Like if you're the only one to do, how are you supposed to have any metrics or any sort of identity layers to that? And so that's when I was like, I'm so tired of trying so hard to fit into these labels because there are no labels to fit into or categorize someone who is the first one to do everything. And it's like just the fact that I'm even doing this is already, a huge feat. So I don't need to prove that I am, Indian enough or American enough or whatever it may be because I simply just am myself.
I think that's beautiful. And I think so many children of the diaspora who have been first generation born outside of their country of origin, or I don't know what the technical word is, but where your ancestors came from. I think, especially women, I see this and I feel it. They just carry this silent burden of being that first woman to do X, Y, Z, A, B, C. And I feel like it can be a real driving force. I can really resonate with that, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners perhaps might be able to as well. Let's start right at the beginning, Sejal. Who's little Sejal? Tell us a little bit about her.
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in the Central Valley in California, which at the time was more of like a rural, more agricultural community. And it was a smaller town, and there wasn't that much of a South Asian population when I first like grew up here. And I feel like for me being younger, I used to feel not necessarily embarrassed, but I feel like I couldn't really proudly like be myself because there's things like, I don't know, I'd get like picked on at school where kids would ask me, "Oh, you're Indian. What does that mean? Like red or dot?" And I'm like, this is just so ridiculous, right? And going to public school in this kind of an environment, like you're coming to terms with people who maybe it's their first time ever seeing someone that looks like you. And I just felt very othered, I think. And so I was very reserved and more on the shy side socially as a child. But I think I just reached this turning point where I was just so tired of dealing with that and so tired of people like questioning things about like my culture. Like, for example, I never questioned like being vegetarian because I grew up vegetarian. My whole family is. And so I would have kids ask me, like, why aren't you eating this? And I'd like put meat in my face and be like, God put animals on earth so we can eat them. And I'm like, I don't know about your God, but I really don't think anyone's out here trying to like invoke violence on animals. So I feel like I would just like have these conversations with these kids and it would just always be met with like some kind of negative sentiment. And I think I just got so fed up with that that kind of my goal was I wanted to leave this town. And I felt like I couldn't be myself here fully. And it's so funny because I have a younger brother, and as he grew up in the same town, now this town has a very large South Asian population. So it's very opposite to how it was when I was growing up here. But I think just seeing so much change can happen within like, the 10 years or whatever it was that huge change happened demographically where I grew up, where now that, when I come visit back home, I still, feel some of that sentiment, even though it doesn't really exist anymore. Those memories and how they made me feel at the time. I don't know if this happens to you whenever you visit your hometown. Like you revert to that version of yourself, you know?
Yeah, you almost carry those experiences. And it's really true. Like I was reading this book where it goes through your different traumas that you might have had and how you carry that emotion within you. And you might not obviously feel it all the time, but certain memories or moments or times or dates, it might just be triggered. And it's amazing how your body remembers. You know how people say you get a gut feel, or sometimes at the mention of something, you might have a little shiver or a shudder. I really get where you're coming from, where you might feel, that those little traumatic moments or those differences that you experienced. And I think similarly, Tedra and I, when we were growing up in school, we were one of the few Asians. And, like our lunchtime, our mum would make our packed lunch. And sometimes it's like a curry or like there's some rice. It's like different, not the usual sandwich. And I remember once I had like a laddu, like the Indian sweet. And I just didn't even know how to explain it to everyone. And they were like, "Oh, what's that? Like, why is it orange?" And I think I literally said it's carrot cake, just to kind of just not even talk about it. And it's amazing because now I look back and I was like almost hiding who I was and hiding my culture. But it's yeah, really interesting.
I think that's really difficult. You don't really recognize it at the time because you don't have a choice when you're younger and you're growing up and no one around you gets you or looks like you and you just don't feel like you belong anywhere. And I think that feeling, it can really affect your personality, how you develop your confidence initially anyway, until obviously, you get to an age where you can recognize things, express yourself maybe better, understand emotions and so forth. But Sejal, so when you were like, okay, I need to leave this place. I can't see myself like living here forever. What made you leave? How did you leave? Where did you go? And did you find somewhere that felt like home?
Yeah, I think that for me, like, obviously, like, I left after I graduated high school to university, and that was my first time ever, like, living outside of my hometown and, experiencing, like, that independence. And so, like, in undergrad, when I went to university, like, I would say those were definitely the best 2 years of my life. I truly, like, got to actually be myself without the influence of, like, you know, being around the same people my entire life, like, through school or, like, my family. and I could actually like grow into who I am without those influences. And I feel like I discovered a lot about myself, specifically that I really, really had a passion for creating, because I got to be in touch with other students that were also like feeling similarly and trying to create new things. And I learned about my passion for modeling and creative campaigns. And then there's a really big indie music scene where people just do shows in their garage or house shows at my college town. And that's how I became really influenced by different kinds of artists and music styles and how they perform. It was really fun. And I think I really got to come into terms in who I am because I had that independence. But I only had 2 years, because what happened after that was the pandemic. And I had to come back to this town. And that's really kind of what the turning point was, I think, for me, that we were talking about earlier. The turning point was when I had to come back here. And I realized that now that everything's online and there's a pandemic and there's no other way for me to really have that social sense of belonging that I achieved in university, finally that sense of independence. And now I'm back and I felt myself reverting. That's when I realized, okay, now I'm going to use this time to express all these feelings that I'm feeling. And like I would write, and I would like write songs, and then I would just record them like using like one of these mics. I would just record on one of these in my closet, and I made my first demo. And that's when I was like, wait, maybe I can actually do this for real. And that kind of led to me pursuing the route that I'm on now, because for me, it was like an outlet. It was like therapy for me and a way for me to express myself, where I was really just creating for me. And I wasn't planning on like posting this or anything. Like I didn't even really know too much about social media at the time. I was just doing it for myself. But when I realized like I can't be the only one that feels this way, and there must be others that feel this way, even if I don't see them in the mainstream media, like maybe we need to create those opportunities for ourselves, because I don't see people saying like these kinds of stories at that time, right? Back in like 2019, 2020, I didn't see that as much. And then now I feel like, okay, there's so much diaspora content. There's so many people like ourselves trying to create spaces. And so I think that what happened was during that time, it was like a turning point for me to be like, okay, maybe I should post this.
That is
Wow.
really brave, and that is so lovely to hear that you found a way to like a coping mechanism, right? And I always feel like creativity can be that outlet to express and to kind of process emotion as well. So tell us about your musical side. Is that something that's always been a part of you, even through growing up, and that you've reconnected with, or is that something you picked up later in life?
So when I was younger, my parents did force me to play violin when I was 6 years old, because we don't have anyone musically talented in our family. I guess I'm the first to do literally everything now that I think about it. And they're like, okay, let's like see what sticks. Let's make her do everything, like every sport, try all these different instruments, see like what sticks. And like, I guess violin really stuck for me. So they put me in lessons when I was 6 years old, and it was like the Suzuki program, which is when you learn to play by listening. And so I basically like had like a really trained ear from that, because I did it from such a young age. And they train you to play by ear. And so I feel like it kind of developed into me being able to really play anything just based on hearing it. So less so theory, but more like adapting, and like making a music a part of my life. And I found a sense of community, because within like the orchestra, the symphony groups, like at my school, like when I was in my hometown, I was always like participating in those groups. And I don't know, because I loved it so much and excelled, I feel like I got a sense of like respect from my like classmates and other kids. And like it was really fun for me to like have that as like kind of a social outlet and also a creative outlet for me among like others, which maybe they don't take it as seriously as I did. But for me, like a lot of the times when I would like lock myself in my room and like practice like a sonata for like 2, 3 hours, like that was like my therapy. Coming from a family that might not believe in therapy, that was my therapy. And I feel like that grew into college as well, where like I was like, okay, I could play all the stringed instruments eventually. So like when I was in like middle school or high school, I was playing all of them. And so my main instrument of choice became viola, which I actually sampled in my EP. I think it's the first song ever because I make very experimental music
What is
of like
EP?
a viola. EP is an extended play. So it's like a mini album. So an album is traditionally 10 tracks and an EP can be like 5 tracks.
Okay, fine.
And what's
And
the
Yeah.
difference between a viola and a violin? I've always wondered.
So a violin is like the smaller one. A viola is slightly bigger, and the violin has this really high pitched E string. So the viola starts like after that E string, and then it has one string. The last string on the viola is the highest string on the cello. So it's in between a violin and a cello.
Oh, wow.
you said you learned just by ear, but then how did you then were you also taught to read music as well? Because we again being kids from first gen, we were always like, yeah, like any opportunity, go for it. Like we were really like encouraged. At one point I think we played like both of us played like 3 or 4 musical instruments, like singing, and we're not musically inclined at all. But it was at the time it was like you just go for it.
Tejal used to play the violin and I used
Yeah.
to be the cello, but I can safely say that neither of us would make this symphony that you were a part of.
No, I think our ears were not tuned
In
at
the
all
slightest.
for that.
You play by ear, you literally hear the music and then you can reproduce it.
Yeah, because I think I can read music and write it, of course, because like you're in these environments and like eventually like I can do it. I find that to be easy. I think what's harder is obviously hearing something and playing it. So for me, I don't find the notes to like I can read and write music, of course, like if someone hands it out in a formal environment. But when you're trying to create music yourself, right, you need to generate that sheet music yourself, which can be very difficult sometimes, especially if you're very experimental. Or for me, I was really interested in trying to, because I speak 5 languages. And so I was really interested in kind of infusing the Carnatic vocal training that I had, which whenever like, when I was growing up, we would visit India. Like my parents wanted to see their parents back when I was growing up. I would get super bored. And so they were just saying, like, giving me options of things I could do. They're like, do you want to do classes? I was like, yeah, like I'll do classes. And like Carnatic singing lessons was one of those things I did when I was bored in India. But I actually really loved it because I feel like I just, from the listening by ear training, I was able to pick it up very easy because of that. And so that's when I realized, okay, I want to mix like the musical training I have with the Carnatic training, but it's really hard to translate over written notes sometimes. And it is a lot of listening by ear. So I think that's when it became useful because now when I like write music, I have my guitar, but like if you give me like tabs or something with the guitar, I can eventually figure it out. But I usually just play by ear because it's like very hard for me to like read notes sometimes of different instruments. Like I'm very comfortable doing it for like violin, viola, cello, bass. But outside of that family, I cannot read notes.
Your love for music is so evident. But when you discovered that, were you not like, right, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life? Like how then did
Yeah.
you make your career decisions?
Yeah, so I never thought it would be a reality for me because I feel like, first of all, I never saw representation of like what success would look like for someone like me. Because when you, at the time of when I was growing up, if you look at what South Asian representation in the media was, it wasn't necessarily all like for, it wasn't necessarily all for like music. And if it was usually like a lot of people that came from like a nepotism background or like Bollywood or had some kind of industry connections. It wasn't very like independent artist forward. And so it wasn't very realistic, especially like being the first everything in my family. I think that that was not really what my family wanted me to do. They obviously wanted to set me up for like stability and having like a successful career, traditional career. So I think it was always just seen as a hobby and not something to be taken seriously. I also do think that there's a certain stigma associated with the entertainment field, arts and entertainment in general. In like my family, I can't speak for everyone's, but I feel like in my family specifically, where that's not really seen as something real. But also, I'm the only woman in my family who's educated and works in general. And both of those things are not seen as a priority. I think in general, in my family, the reality is when you're of age, like you get married and you start a family. And I haven't done either of those things. So I think a lot of things that I did were very unconventional. And I was the first one to do all these things. So when I would hear that, like, oh, this is a cute hobby, like when I would share it with my parents, or they wouldn't really like be supportive in that, like, this is a real thing you can pursue. It's more like do it on the side, but also focus on like your stable career, because that's more something in your control, right? So for me, I realized, okay, like maybe I can try to do both. But that kind of brings me to where I am today, where you can't just be doing everything at once, because what happens is you become jack of all trades, master of none. And that can be good in some ways, but also in some ways, it's led me to think about, because of my certain circumstances and being the first one to do all of these things, I can't be too hard on myself if I'm not 100% in all of them, right? Because I had to make certain choices and pick and choose where I could.
Wow. I really want to talk about where you are today, because I feel like we've got an amazing insight into little Sejal and how she went through what she went through and how she found her creative outlet. Tell us where you are today and where you see yourself going.
Yeah, I think today I'm more in a self-reflective position, because I would say last year I had a lot of momentum. I did a lot very quickly. I would say last year is where I kind of made a lot of the creative milestones in my creative career. So I moved to New York last year in January, and I also started a part-time MBA program. So I moved to a completely new city across the country, New York City, by myself. I didn't know a single soul. I started a very rigorous part-time MBA program, and I also work a full-time job in tech. So I did all these things. I moved, and then within like 5 hours of me moving to New York, I was already in the club networking with like artists and like producers and people that like run the creative scene in New York already. And I don't know, I just feel like I had something to prove. Like, I feel like I've always felt that. I think it's because of like my roots and my identity, that I constantly feel like I have to prove myself and I have to be the best in everything I do. Even with playing violin as a 6-year-old, I'm like, I have to be the best 6-year-old playing violin. I was so competitive. And I think I'm still a little bit in that way, where I don't have anyone to connect me or to hold my hand, and no one is ever going to hand me an opportunity, and no one ever has in my life. Anything that I've ever achieved, whether it be my corporate job or getting any creative opportunity in my life, I've had to fight for it. I've literally had to go and either create it for myself or go and like bombard someone until they like finally hear me out and they give me a chance. And I think that for me, knowing all of this from my life, living in California, and then, some of the creative work I did in San Francisco when I started the festival, I came into this mindset when I was in New York. Okay, I know how it is. I need to just go all in, meet as many people as I can, show up, make these connections. And within 6 months, I was able to produce over 10 events across all of these different cities. So like New York, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, at all of these wonderful venues, wonderful creative events that were full service, like end to end produced by me. And it was a lot. I was doing a lot. It honestly burnt me out, because I was working with over 40 different creatives, and creative people are they're very interesting people, right? They're very interesting personalities, and I love them, of course, but it's a lot, because you're doing like this people management piece. There's logistics with managing the events. There's all of the marketing work, and you're also trying to build like this digital storytelling and also solidify yourself as someone that's like completely new in this scene. I'm trying to bring something new to the table with like Undefined. And I think it was a lot that I put on my plate. And on top of that, I'm an independent artist. So I was seeking opportunities for myself to perform outside of that and like DJ and all of this. And I did like my first international tour within that 6 months. And so I was doing like the festival, the events, DJing at all of these major venues and clubs and performing. And I released 2 singles, and it was a lot. I actually like was burnt out, I think. And I think I'm still a little burnt out today.
It sounds incredible, but it also sounds incredibly exhausting. I can understand you clearly have a fire in your belly. It's a combination of all of like your passion, but also like want to prove and want to make impact, and it's almost like this, I can do it, like why can't I do it attitude, being like, you kind of challenge yourself constantly and consistently to be like, well, who says I can't? And you just keep going. Do you think you're going to have to choose between your creative career and your, stable corporate career? Or are you
I
hoping that
think
you're
I've
going to be able to, do both alongside each other?
Yeah, I think I've been very lucky in that my corporate career is very supportive of what I do, because obviously, like, if you look me up, it's public, and I'm not trying to hide anything that I do. And I think they've been very supportive, which is why I've, been at the same company for so long, because they really encourage me to have a life outside of the corporate work. And I think it really makes me better at what I do, because when you're an interdisciplinary creative, I think you start to see, yeah, even in a corporate career or in business school, like you see these intersections of where you can bring these things into play. Like being a creative, you know how to build a brand and market yourself, you know how to be a really good public speaker, you know how to, you know, connect with different audiences and really showcase your skill set. And I think that all of these really have made me excel as a student and as, someone that works in big tech. And so I think both of those really connect with what I do. And I also feel like it's really valuable for me to have this corporate perspective as someone who's a founder and an entrepreneur in a creative space, because I'm firsthand seeing and how industries, especially with AI disrupting so much, how it actually will start to affect these other industries. And because I have the experience from all of these angles, I know how to think about scaling something for what the industry will look like in the next 5 to 10 years, right? Because it's changing so much now. And I think that the way that we approach creativity and a lot of these fields, they're going to change so much, and they already have. And I have insights of how they work from both ends of the spectrum. And I think that's why, for me, sometimes I'm like, maybe it's okay to slow down a little bit and think more deeply about what the impact is going to have. So that's why I focus so much on in person experience, because I noticed that there was such a lack of that third space and that feeling of true, authentic, and genuine connection. So many people throw events, and I know there's so many diaspora like related events and things that exist, especially in major cities like New York. But I think for me, I had to actually go and participate. I always think like if you're going to create something, please participate in that space first so you understand what it's like. Then you can have like a valid something to bring to the table. So when I would attend a lot of these events by myself, I would just feel like whatever was missing, right? Whether that was like a sense of clickiness, a lack of authenticity, or just things that didn't align with my values. And I tried to find like what is missing here and how can I quantify what's missing and create value, right? Create value to the market, which is this event space, which is the New York City community. And that's exactly why I think the music festival was successful, because with Rosewater, it's very unique, and it's definitely like kind of my life's dream to like create a music festival that is my dream music festival. And it's my dream music festival because it's somewhere where finally you can enter. And from the moment you walk in to the moment you go home, you finally feel at home. And I've never had that feeling of what it feels like to feel at home. Even when I'm at home, I've never felt that. And to be able to create that and to replicate it, I think we've done it 3, 4 times now. Every time, I think that is how I quantify my success.
Hey, are you enjoying this episode? If you are, you might love our monthly newsletter.
It's where Nehal and I share podcast updates, community news, upcoming events, reflections, ideas, and some fun extras.
You can sign up at the link in the show notes.
Back to the conversation. That's insane. And I love that. And I feel like that sense of human connection, what you alluded to earlier, is in today's world super important. There's stats out there. There's so many in my head. I don't know which ones to quote, but essentially one of that's coming to mind is we're so connected, hyper connected, more than we were ever, yet loneliness is higher than ever in the younger generations, which is really old. And it's almost like the impact it's having to people's physical health is like you're smoking 10 or 15 cigarettes a day, which is really shocking, just by this sense of being isolated. So what do you do in your events? I'm not saying you have to divulge your secret formula, but what do you do that enables people to feel at home? Like, what do you do differently?
Yeah.
Like, how do you create that
Yeah.
experience?
I totally get that. I think it's like you're seeing all these people being affected, and even though we have social media and all these ways of connecting, it feels empty. Like it feels a little bit like something's just off. And I think it is that authenticity piece. I think when you're trying to market something diaspora, it needs to be very authentic and genuine. And I'm not the spokesperson for all diaspora folk. And I always try to make that super clear, right? I'm only building and coming from my own unique experience. And that is that I want to create like a sense of belonging and home. I don't want any toxicity in these spaces. I don't want like these spaces to feel like what we've been trying to run from as third culture kids, right? We want to authentically be ourselves in every aspect of our identity. And I think for me to create that, I need to first embody that mindset myself in every way because I wasn't doing it from a marketing perspective. I think a lot of why events and creative people or even anyone that has like the spotlight on them in like a social media type sense where they tend to fail, especially because I know cancel culture is a thing, right? It's because it's not authentic. At the end of the day, why it ends up crashing is you'll have momentum, whatever, but it crashes if you are not actually embodying what you're putting out there. You're saying all these mixed signal messages just to get people in the door, to push product, to profit off of them, but you don't actually live and breathe what that is. And I live and breathe what it is. So for me, whether or not, like I never made any sort of profit from any of this because I give back to the local communities. These are benefits. So I donate this. So for me, it's not really in it for me. I'm doing it because I genuinely believe in this. I genuinely live and breathe like that mindset of welcome home, right? And I think it also comes into play where not everyone's going to get what I'm doing, right? And so I want to work with those who do get what I'm doing because why am I going to sit here and try to convince someone else to believe in me when I know that there's other people that do? So I'm going to work with the people who do believe in me. And so what I did is I literally just said kind of what I just said to both of you on my phone. I hit record and I just started talking about the event and what it means to me and like why it's special and why I think people should come. And I had some sort of like a funny hook or whatever, just to like make sure people didn't keep scrolling. And it went viral. And I think it's because people could see that I was being vulnerable and that I was being genuine. And I think a lot of people resonated with that because I ended it with a call to action of like if you are interested in helping, like reach out, like let's become friends. Let's become a community. And I think I was able to tap into so many people that felt similar. I like couldn't even get through all the responses, but it felt so good to know that there's other people that feel the way that I do and they want to help out of the goodness of their heart. So I had so many volunteers that actually came through and supported me to make the music festival actually happen that touched my heart because these people believed in what I had to say and they were just like happy that I was the one to say it because I think sometimes people just don't want to be the ones to like be the person who represents these things and say it. But I'm like, I'm happy to be that person if that's what it takes to get this off the ground, you know?
It takes a lot of
Oh,
courage to
yeah.
stick your head above the water and to be that slightly different, controversial, or voice that opinion.
So brave of you, like Tejal says, to stick your neck out and share that on social media. But also, like, social media can be so powerful that actually people can amplify your message. So, but it's always about, I think there's a lot of fear about putting yourself out there on social media for loads of people. And I just want you to remember that if you're doing it with the right intentions, where you could genuinely help people, like you could actually have such a huge impact. And I think what you've done there is amazing. And also celebrating that intrinsic nature of humans, that actually humans do want to help each other. Humans want to help. Humans are kind. Sometimes we forget that. Quite often we forget that because of the world that we live in today. But what you've shared there about how many volunteers coming through and making your dream happen, that is incredible.
What's your dream for Undefined? Like, what's your big goal? Or if you could make it into, anything, what do you want it to become?
I think for me, success looks like having a continued and lasting impact on other creatives. So continuing to dismantle like gatekept systems and creating opportunities. I think I want to head more in the direction of more of a business route or like a creative management route where I see a creative and I want them to just focus on their craft, whatever that may be, and not have to worry about all of these gate kept barriers or social media KPIs, or like they want to like achieve this thing, like they want to perform at this one venue, but they don't know how to get their foot in the door. I don't want them to worry about any of these things. I want them to just focus on their craft and not being the best at their craft or any metric there, more doing their craft authentically in a way that feels genuine to them and represents the best version of themselves creatively at whatever moment that is in their life. And if I believe in the work that they're doing and their message, and it also aligns with this counterculture that Undefined seems to represent, then I want to help them get there. I want to help them see that success. And I think I have like the business acumen and the experience to help a creative achieve that. And I think a big barrier that exists for so many creatives is all of these barriers, right? Because as an independent, you have to do everything yourself. You're like the CEO of yourself. And you have to manage all of these different things, and it's a lot. But then where's the time for you to actually put into what you love and what made you do it in the first place? That's what happened to me. I did this for myself, and then I was like, wait, no, I want to share it with other people. But to share it with other people and to do it on the scale that I want to, there's all of these barriers, right? And so I don't want anyone else to go through that because I know how difficult it can be and it can really burn you out. And so for me, success looks like helping those kinds of creatives achieve their dreams and being their advocate and their mentor, because I never had that. So I want to be that home for others.
And how did you recover from burnout? I mean, you said you're
I
not
would
entirely
say-
recovered, but like,
Yeah.
I will just reinforce that. But what sort of helped you not be as out?
Yeah, I would say it comes and goes in waves. I think just not putting the pressure on myself. I think as someone who feels like they constantly need to prove themselves to be valid, I think that whenever there's no momentum, like I need to be doing something or having some sort of achievement or something in the books every week, right? That's kind of how I was living last year. That was unattainable. I mean, I achieved so many like things, but at the cost of me damaging my health, and so many other things that are not positive, right? Because I wasn't sleeping. I was so stressed. There was always a fire. When you work in events or any startup or any entrepreneur can relate to this, there's like 20 fires every hour. And it's just endless. And as someone who is so type A and like needs everything to be a certain way, I'm such a planner, I feel like my biggest learning was you need to let go. Some things are just not in your control, and whatever's meant to be will be, as long as you're just trying your best. And I think just having a lot of love for myself and that inner child version of me, like going back to what we said, like I was shy, I was bullied, I was put down, I never felt like I belonged, and being like, hey, it's okay, you did that, you belong now, you did your thing, you don't have to be doing everything all at once, and like giving that love to myself. And knowing that there's no one I need to prove anything to but myself. And I already did the thing just by being here. I think that's helping me. And of course, comes and goes in waves. Like I'm sitting here saying it, but I'm saying it for myself to also like listen, you know?
Yeah.
Like I need this tattooed inside my eyelids sometimes. I think like it's so easy to forget sometimes because you'll feel like you're behind, or you'll maybe see something on social media and be like, oh, like, why am I not doing that thing? But you don't know anyone else's timeline but yourself, and you only have the context for yourself. So I think for me, that's been helpful in helping me avoid burnout and just learning to be, it's okay if I'm not doing something at this time. It's okay if I'm not creating like the next big thing. It's okay to just exist in the moment and support others. Like instead of focusing on my burnout, why don't I try to support others that are trying to do something right now and be like, how can I support you and be your community, be your volunteer, right? And feed into community instead, because maybe I can't do right now. I'm not capable, but they are. And I know what that's like. I know how difficult it is. So that's where I'm like, how can I help you? How can I come be on your platform? How can I come support you and use what skills and connections I have to help you achieve that? Because I think the biggest misconception that people have in the diasporic community is that we're very competitive and we don't like to see each other win, or we are out to get one another. And that is true, right? Sometimes. But I think, why can't we see it more as like, your success is my success, right? Because if I see someone else that's from a diaspora background achieving their dreams and doing this, that means it's possible for me too. And I'm happy to see other people's success, even if it's not, something that I can like profit off of or use for myself. And I think that's how I operate. And that's why I created this in the first place.
And I think that really speaks volumes for having an abundance mindset, right? Saying there's a plenty of opportunity for everyone. There's a seat for everyone at the table. If not, we'll make the table bigger. It's not a case of, if you get to do that, that's stopping me or robbing me of doing something or of opportunity. And I really, I think Nihal and I are huge advocates about this plenty of opportunity for everyone to be doing what they want. And I know some people will say, well, that's really naive, because certain professions are really competitive. If you want to get to in certain areas, you want to get to a certain place. And I guess it's about both can coexist, right? You can be like the music industry, the entertainment industry, very competitive, but also so is corporate life. I think you can't really escape competition, but I think when you recognize that your value is not based on your merit or your achievements, and you're much bigger than that, I think it kind of just puts things into perspective. But I think getting to that point, it takes a while. And I really do resonate with so much of what you're saying about the keep pushing, keep going, supporting, cheerleading for others at the expense of yourself. Everyone's story is unique, but there are some threads that are just so similar. And although we've grown up in very different places, there's so much in common there. Now, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it just reminded me earlier of when Sejal said, how you were hungry, that you made your opportunities happen as well. Nothing's ever handed to you. And I think that piece is really important as well, because I do think there's a lot of competition. There is. I mean, I remember I'll happily talk about myself. I was really competitive at school. Like I really was. I was like, I want to be the best at everything. I want to be the best. I want to be the best. And I really try and go for things. And I think slowly over time, I've eased and I've realized that actually there is more value, and we talk about this a lot, collaboration, not competition, because you can learn so much from other people, right? And you can make yourself a better person, a better human, and with better skills and a more broader outlook. So that's really, really important. But I loved how you said, you would bombard people until you were heard, and you were hungry, and you also made things happen. And I think that is so important in any industry, that you actually take some ownership of your path and you really go out there, you make those connections. And you said you showed up. Like showing up to make those connections is so key. Like even how you both connected, I think that's a beautiful story, which one of you can share. But that connection led to this, right? Like cross-continent podcast, which is nuts.
Also, I just want to say, like, actually, you said you described yourself as quite a shy person who was bullied, yet you've gone out there, you've showed up, you in a new city, you didn't know a soul, and you've kind of like
Created
essentially
a festival.
established yourself as somebody to be taken seriously in the music field, and yeah, created a flipping music festival. That's like mad. That's just mad. Our story is really, really lovely. Like Sejal and I met in Mexico about 6 months ago in a sweat lodge. And out of all people, like who'd signed up to this experience, like I met somebody who practically had the same name as me. And then we got chatting and realized we had quite a bit in common. So, and here we are, fast forward 6 months. So it's amazing. I do believe the universe has works in mysterious ways. Certain times, certain people you're meant to, you're meant to cross paths with, and that's going to happen one way or another. I want to on a little bit about, you talked about family, although they were very supportive of education, giving you opportunities and stuff, there seems to be this subliminal pressure of, but you're going to still have to get married and settle down and all of this, that narrative, especially as a woman that we're all pretty familiar with. Did you feel pressure to follow that traditional expectation? And if you did, how have you not succumbed or followed your own path?
Yeah, I think we talked about this after Sweat Lodge experience as well, but I think for me, it's not that I didn't want that. I think I obviously like saw that as kind of what's supposed to be done, right? Like every other female in my family has that. Like and I see the way that they're treated and how wonderful it is to be in a situation where you're in like this loving marriage and things are just like very like clear and established, and as a woman like you don't have to work, like your husband takes care of you, and it just seems like this fantasy, I think, for me that I wanted, but it's not a reality, and it's not something that really is it exists, especially in the States. I think it's very difficult. And I think that there's also layers to it where it's like finding a person that also meets the expectations of myself and my family. Like it's not something that is guaranteed, right? That's not necessarily in my control. It's luck, right? And I think the way that I wanted to phrase this in my mind was, yes, I would love to be married and have the traditional setup and find love and have a family. I would love to. That is still my goal and something I would like to do. But it's not something you can control because it takes two, right? It's a nice to have. And I think for me, I phrased it as more like this is something that's really nice to have. If it happens for me, that's amazing and very lucky. And I love that. But life doesn't owe you anything. Life does not owe you that you're going to get this promotion at workplace, that you're going to meet the love of your life, that you're going to have a children or a healthy family. None of that is guaranteed in life. And I think like going back to what you mentioned, Nihal, everything I've had to do, I've had to fight for myself and had to make it happen for me. And this is just one of those things too, right? It's not something that I can really make happen for me. I've tried, but it's like I kind of realized, you know what I do have control over? Myself, my mindset, taking myself to do these experiences like the Sweat Lodge, right? I have choice and agency in making sure that I can control that for myself, achieving my dreams that are in my hands, right? And so I think for me it was just restructuring what dreams look like for me, right? So now being married and all of that, it's a nice to have. It's still something I really want, but it's not my dream because I achieved my dreams, because my dreams are something I have control and agency over, and that I know that when I'm being myself, I can attain them. And I think it's just having that realistic approach with it. And I think that my parents are very understanding of that because they've seen that I've tried and they've seen who I am as a person. And I think it's really just a cultural thing, right? With them not seeing the creative things that I do, or me being in school as something that is valuable, right? For them, they're like, we want you to be stable, and stability looks like, having like someone to take care of you and like all of that. But now they see that's not something I can control. So they're like, okay, like at least she has a stable career, right? So anything you do on top of that, like that's on you, you know? And anything gets tough because sometimes they're like, you should delete all your social media. Why are you doing all of these creative things? Why do you post on social media in the first place? Make everything private. That's the reason why you're not married. Those comments hurt. They do. They hurt a lot. But I have to just stay strong and remind myself I'm the first one to even do anything in my bloodline. There's no blueprint. I'm the blueprint. So I need to remind myself if I do want to carry this goal, I want to make sure I attract the right person and that I am the role model for my future children if I want to be a mother and pursue that path, which I do. And so if I succumb to this, I'm just going to continue the same perpetuated stigma on creatives and on women achieving their dreams and being the first to do everything. And what would be the point of me going through all of that just to, succumb to that? So that's why I think I just remind myself, look, they're from a different generation, different background. They didn't have the same experiences as I did. I know that whatever I'm doing, I'm staying true to myself. I'm being authentic in what I do, and I'm doing it with honor and value, right? My own version of that. And I kind of just think of it as like I have to do what I need to do in order to achieve what I deem as worthy in my dreams in this one life that we're guaranteed. And so I'm just living it in that way. And it doesn't mean that it's perfect and doesn't hurt. Like I said, it's a daily battle. But I think the main thing to take away is reminding myself I am the first one to do it. So there's no other measure of what success looks like besides my own.
Amazing. Sejal, how old are you?
I'm 26.
You are wise beyond your years. You have such a bright future ahead of you, and we're super excited to see you flourish. Listen, thank you so much for coming along, sharing yourself so beautifully, authentically, your journey with us and our listeners. And I think it's just, I hope if they take anything away from this conversation, I think one of them is like, yes, you can have a sensible career, but you don't have to necessarily neatly fit inside a box. You really can pursue that creative side of you side by side, whatever that may look like, and just whilst being, true to yourself and your authentic self.
And I think one thing that is really stands out about you, Sejal, is how vulnerable you are. And I think you have fully embraced the authenticity that we can feel it. And I'm not surprised that you had so many people reach out to you and you probably couldn't get through all the messages of everyone who wanted to volunteer at Rosewater. So that does not surprise me or Sejal in the slightest. So keep being vulnerable because I think you will attract your tribe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
And
Sejal.
one last question
Yes.
before we go. Give our listeners one piece of advice or a certain takeaway that you really wanted them to carry forward. What would it be?
I would say be angry, stay hungry, and let that guide you into creating the opportunities and being your truest authentic self, because that you can use that to actually channel your fuel into achieving these things. And I stayed hungry and I stay angry and I channel that into these ways because we should never accept that systems, institutions, or anything about our identity that we can't change constitutes our future, because we can control what we create for ourselves.
Amazing.
Thank
Thank you, Sejal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and hit subscribe on YouTube so that you never miss a new one. It really helps if you rate and review the show. And if you found this episode valuable, share it with a friend, family member, or colleague. We appreciate your support and we will catch you next time. Bye bye.